See where I was at, Professor. Yes, this page. See how- Yeah. Okay, we're good. Okay. We'll call the meeting to order at 5:34. The approval of the minutes of the meeting of the March 15th, 2023 meeting. Do I have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes of March 15th, 2023.
I'll second.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. Approve the minutes for March 15th, 2023. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it, motion carried. Subdivision and number 3, subdivision land development. A Soto section 26523B 13 modification request. The minor plan for Queen and Frederick Streets mixed use project has been submitted to the city to develop the project in 3 phases. The phase 1 of the project, which is currently used review, has to include a minimum of 25% of the overall residential units in the approved land and development plan in accordance with 26523B 13. However, Hankins Group, a project's developer, proposed to only construct residential units within phase 2 and 3 of the overall mixed-use development and requests a planning commission's waiver of section 26523B.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just give some brief remarks on this, and we actually have the developer with us this evening to elaborate further. This project should be familiar to you all, the Queen and Frederick mixed-use project by LGH and Henkin. Mr. Cajo actually brought this to my attention recently, realizing that we were moving ahead with a phased plan and had not addressed this provision in the saldo. So just as a quick recap, you all approved a final land development plan for this project, which is sizable, includes a parking structure, medical office building, 2 blocks of residential development. And since then, the developer, with the changes in economic conditions, was not able to move forward with the residential and wanted to only do the medical office building with LGH. So city was amenable to this and said, yes, we can do that, but we should have more construction phasing spelled out and presented to the city. Because once the medical office building goes up, parking is required for that, and that takes up some of the land that would be for residential. So there's some phasing issues we had to look at more closely. So the developer submitted those to us as a minor plan, which is reviewed just by city staff, given that the full project was not changing at all, just the way that it was being staged or phased. So one of the things that came up in that review is that our ordinance does require that 25% of the overall residential units is included in the first phase of the project. And this is not the case in this instance. LGH, being the partner developer, wants to do the medical office building, and Henkin is asking to continue with that. And in fact, it's under construction right now. They're well along in building the medical office building. So this is somewhat after the fact that we're considering this. But I'll just pause there. I'll welcome Neil up to provide some more information if you'd like. And you might have to hit the on button on that mic.
That's just me working? Okay. Good afternoon. So, there was an accident on 222. I was afraid I wasn't gonna make it, but I'm glad I did. I'm happy to answer any questions, but it really is, it's an economic issue for us.
Excuse me, could you state your name?
Sure.
And
Neil Fisher, I'm the Vice President of Development for the Hankin Group.
thank you.
The overall scale of the project, full build out is $100 million project. So we do want to phase the project so that we can build the medical office building first, and then as economic conditions allow us to move forward, we will move forward with the parking garage and the residential phases. I'm happy to go into as much detail as you would like, or if you have any questions, happy to answer those.
I have a question.
Sure.
What is the timeline for Phase 2 and Phase 3?
So so basically what's happened from an economic standpoint is interest rates have gone up, right? Now, when you look at 10-year, like the 10-year projection on interest rates, they're coming back down again. So, but right now, the interest rates have gone up. In addition to that, the inflation that we're all being faced with have also hit construction costs. We have had projects that have gone up 15% a year for the past 2 years. So basically, if you say, what used to cost, say, we'll say $10 million, I'll use for my own easy math here, that project is now $13 million, right? It's gone, 30% over 2 years. And basically what's happened is it's hit a point where you can't charge enough in rent to justify building the building. So one of two things has to happen. Construction costs have to drop, or interest rates have to drop, because even, you have to put equity, you have to put your money into the project, but you still have to borrow, or at least, we will borrow on the project. And that carrying cost says that you can't afford to build at this point in time. Does that make sense?
Definitely does.
Okay.
I know, I
So,
completely understand.
so
But
what,
do you have like an estimated timeline then?
we are
10 years? Is that what you're saying?
What's that?
Are you saying 10 years?
Oh, no,
because
so
of the
interest rates
rate?
are based, so when you look at financing, that you kind of do a forward look. That's what the banks do, right? And they look at the 10-year.
Right.
And that's what they base your interest rate on today. So, and what's been happening is that's starting to come back down, right? And part of that is because, this is of my own, so part of that is that they don't want to stall the economy, right? So if you raise interest rates and just continue to raise interest rates, it's a way of putting brakes on. And because it will stall projects, right? So they don't want to see a mass halt, right?
Right.
So so what the banks or the Fed is now doing is there that long-term look, those rates are starting to come back down, which means that
Right. I understand the financial part.
Okay.
I listen a lot to the news.
It's a look
But
at.
do you know what the timeline is? Do you have an estimated timeline?
It's really market, right?
Okay.
Now, that being said, we are anxious to move forward, and we believe in the Lancaster market. So as soon as one of those two things can work for us, we don't need them both. We need one, right? We will pull the trigger and move forward with the residential.
How is your project different than all the other housing projects that are currently going up in the city?
I don't think it is different.
Well, then why are the finances working for them and
So
not
it
you?
depends on when they locked in financing. That's what it comes down to. So I actually think what we could see happen in the future is developers by nature are very optimistic. We're a very cautious developer. We do not want to put ourselves in a situation that could jeopardize a project or our company, right? So what people do is if they lock financing in, they could have locked it in at a variable rate. And what's going to happen is after your construction's complete, people are going to have to come up with a lot of money because of variable rate. So if they borrow it at, say, 4%, and now it's at 6%, that's a very big difference, financial implication on a project. I'm not sure, I don't think a lot of people would have ever anticipated a much higher interest rate when they actually took out their initial construction financing. We typically do not take out construction financing. We go right to permanent financing. So that's what we are different from a lot of developers in that most developers will take out construction financing, build the project with the anticipation that the interest rate is really going to stay the same. You get hit with an increased rate that you're not anticipating, and it puts banks in difficult situations. We are different in that we don't take out construction financing. We go right to the permanent financing because you get a better rate. So I guess we are different.
Yeah, that might make some difference there. Just seems strange to me because you're gonna be building the non-residential stuff though, still?
Yeah, we'll build the
That's the idea.
non-resident, yes, the non-residential portion.
And that's more profitable, or
Well,
why?
what it is that there is a lease, and we have a commitment to Lancaster General, and we will fulfill that commitment.
Okay.
Mr. Smith, can you educate us a little bit on the timeline of these approvals and then how that process affects the ultimate uncertainty of the financial markets and the situation that, I'm sorry, I don't recall your last name, but.
Sure. Neil Fisher.
Mr.
Douglas
Fisher.
can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe your approvals are good for roughly 5 years, and after which, if we don't build, we have to come back to you. Is that correct, Douglas?
Yeah, that is mostly correct. Yeah, there are some caveats to this. So the way the ordinance and the state code is written is the applicant has 5 years to substantially complete the required improvements in order to vest their rights in that plan. If those are not substantially completed, then the developer is subject to any changes in ordinances that have happened in that time period. Right now, they have a plan that protects them from any changes in ordinances. Like tonight, if you all recommend a zoning change, that wouldn't affect them at all. But after those 5 years, and certainly there have been ordinance updates even since their plan approval has been provided, and most notably our stormwater ordinance, essentially that would require a significantly amended plan to be submitted back to the Planning Commission. In addition to that, we're holding about $1.7 million in financial guarantee associated with the full scope of their current project. And the city would have the right to act on that if it needed to provide the improvements that are in the plan, not the building itself, of course, but street, sidewalk, utility connections potentially, all of those different site amenities. There can be extensions granted by the Planning Commission. The other thing that I'll add here is that, this request, where we've ended up is a little bit unusual, and typically when we do a phased plan, we identify those phases in a preliminary plan, which we've already gone through, and then the developer would come back with final plans for each of the phases. In this case, we had a preliminary and a final plan done, economic conditions changed, and now we're dealing with the phasing through a minor plan submission where we can spell out all of those phasing details. So typically in a preliminary plan, if those improvements go beyond the 5-year limit, the developer would be required to submit a timeline with deadlines by which they intend to file each of the final plans. So, I do think that the questions about scheduling are pertinent, and given that at the end of this, or come October, you'll be 1 year into your 5-year period for building, that basically leaves you 4 years to construct the rest of the project under current ordinances, and then the timeline counts down. The way it's worded is that the improvements need to be substantially completed.
Can you go a little bit further into what substantially completed means?
I think I would have to involve a solicitor in that, yeah, and it would be specific to the project potentially. But does it include just the site improvements, or does it include the building itself? I think we'd have to get into more discussion about that with legal counsel.
What percentage of this project as a whole is residential versus other uses?
I'm sorry, what was your question?
So you're going to do phase one, I guess, right, without any residential? So,
Phase one is a 33,000 square foot medical office building.
okay, and then how many square feet is the residential then? Once
I
everything's
don't know how
complete?
many square feet off the top of my head, however, it's 244 apartments, the project.
Okay,
So it's like the first phase, we're coming in, we're building the commercial portion. And then the second, and the subsequent phases is really just the residential.
well, said a different
Which
way
is-
then, how much of this construction going to cost of the first phase versus the other two phases?
Construction of the first phase is probably, it's over $20 million.
Okay. And then how much is?
The overall project's about $100 million.
Okay, so about 20% of the project is in
That's
phase one.
correct.
Okay.
What happens if the residential buildings aren't constructed?
Then we would have to come back for a different plan.
Where's that one?
There is, it's like,
the
there's
money
no,
that
there's
they-
like a no harm, it's like, it doesn't hurt us. I mean, if we don't build it because economic conditions don't permit us to build for some reason, and we exceed that 5-year period, let's say it sits for longer, we're gonna have to come back with whatever type of development that we ultimately will build and seek approval through your ordinances. Bottom line is, the city can't force us to build apartments, and if that's your question.
No, I mean, that's not my question, but I see what you're saying, but.
So what does the city get to do if they can't build? I guess my
Right.
question would be like, do we just keep that 1.7 million that they deposited for those improvements?
No, that $1.7 million is to secure public improvements. So for instance, we are making improvements to Market Street. We're making, curb improvements, sidewalk improvements, stormwater improvements. Quite frankly, most of which we're putting in the first phase. So what that $1.7 million covers is the things that impact the public, right? So for instance, let's say we didn't do any, so we didn't put sidewalks in, right? The city could say, Hankin Group, you didn't put your sidewalks in, go put your sidewalks in. And we say, oh my gosh, no, we're not going to put your sidewalks in. The city could go to our bank, say, you know what, those sidewalks are going to cost $10,000. Don't just ignore the numbers, right? And take that money, hire a contractor, and put the sidewalks in at my expense. So you're securing the improvements. The financial security is to secure the improvements that have an impact on the public. I'll say that, this is kind of a broad brush, but Douglas, correct me if I'm wrong.
Nope, that's all accurate. In one other instance, a developer did not build the building that they got approval for. And they abandoned the project altogether. The city did pull on that line of credit, and I forget what the total was that we got, $130,000 or something. And we intend to make those improvements in the public right of way with that money. So we're not doing anything on site. We've decided just to focus on the public right of way in that project.
to cut to the chase, I think our concern is that, at least my concern, I won't speak for everybody else. We have empty commercial space in the city. You're asking us to build commercial, give you a waiver so you can build commercial, and we have a housing shortage and you want to not build the housing, and we're concerned that the housing's never going to be put up. That's kind of where I'm kind of stuck. I'm not saying that I would definitely say no, but that's concerning.
So, one, as far as building the commercial space, building the commercial space is good for the city, right? It is building the family medicine, the urgent care that Lancaster General has talked about with city council, with the planning commission. So you do want, I mean, it's providing health care to your residents, and it's making your health care more efficient. So that's a good thing, right? As far as the residential goes, we are not in a position, I understand the housing shortage, I understand all the housing issues. The problem is that no matter what, the costs are high and the interest rates are high. And it's a problem to build housing. We are not in a position to build that housing today. We want to build it as soon as we can, but it is not today.
What is the timeline of the MOB?
It's under construction.
When's it going to be finished?
Should be February.
So it's April.
Right.
Okay. What is the plan for that site at the completion of the medical office building? How are you planning to leave the site conditions?
Oh, exactly what's on the plan right there.
So there's currently a parking lot at the corner, but it doesn't cover the entirety of the remainder of the site between the medical office building and that parking lot. So Henkin is proposing to infill that with additional parking lot, which is what meets the parking needs for the medical office building in the meantime. This would be phase one, and then phase two would be the completion of that block going from the medical office building north. They'd be filling in the residential structure. And then if needed, a phase three would be the western block, but from what I've been told, 2 and 3 could happen together if the stars align.
Most like, I really, we did separate phase 2 and 3 just because it is separated by a road. But the project, from a residential construction standpoint, makes the most sense to build all at one time. There's efficiencies. There's also, you're building a parking structure associated with the residential. So again, listen, from a financial standpoint, if you're building a parking structure that's going to serve the residential, you want to build the residential that people are going to park in. You don't want to build a structure that is not going to be utilized. So it does make sense for phase 2 and 3 from a developer's perspective to build together. We separated them on the plan simply because they're separated by Market Street.
So is it possible that you would reduce the number of units? But right now, it's 244 units.
Yeah, that's correct. I don't see us reducing the number of units.
You don't see that?
No, I do not. Our architectural plans are done. They're really, we could pull a building permit. The plans have already been reviewed by the city and by your third-party inspector. So this project and what you see is what we anticipate to build.
Okay. I say that because you talked about the costs, so.
Yeah, we don't plan on changing our project.
Okay.
We definitely believe in the project, and we believe in the area. We just need a little time to work out the finances.
Neil, is Henkin seeking any options right now to try to close the gap? I mean, are there ways that you guys are working to make this happen?
So the way that really the only way to make it happen is to bring in an investor, right? Because then you're not taking out financing and you're not paying carrying costs. We typically do not bring in investors, but we have discussed it and we are looking at it. We would never take I should never say never. We are a long-term developer. We do not sell our projects. We have projects that we've had for 50 years, 60 years now because of we're second generation. And so if we bring somebody in, it would be as a silent partner, if that makes sense.
Just a question over here, sorry. If you went 25% of your units, what does that even look like?
It doesn't work, right? It's like, it doesn't work.
I think it's mostly designed for like a single-family development.
Right, yeah.
Right,
I'm looking at the plan, like, how do you even make that happen? And I'm just trying to understand, I mean, granted, so if we were to deny the waiver, it's basically the project doesn't move forward, is
Well,
what
if you
it's
deny the
like.
waiver, then what I would do is I would submit a land development plan just for the medical office and take off the residential.
Gotcha.
It's a in my opinion, it's a formality, right? So I would take off all the residential, I would get approved the medical office building as what's shown on phase one, and you would approve it, and then I would come back and right after that, and I would get a plan approved for the second, for the residential phases, and keep the project the same. So there isn't I mean, I also agree with Douglas. When you look at the ordinance, it is really geared towards a project that is going to be like townhouses or single family. It is not designed for when you are building a city block, right? Where you're building two buildings and you say, all right, we'll build 25% of the units. And you say, well, how am I supposed to do that? You can't phase this project in that manner from a construction standpoint.
Very familiar, but yeah, I was just curious if
Yeah.
there was even a possibility, so.
25% is about 60 units, so it's a pretty big apartment building.
Yeah, I mean, Douglas, is the city in favor of the waiver?
Yes, the recommendation is to approve the waiver. I think it would be helpful to get more information from Hankin about what projected timelines could look like for the additional phases. I know that that's hard to pin down, but if you could do some thinking about that, it would, I think, benefit us and just tracking housing development in the city.
Our intention is within the next 5 years that we will build this project. Based on what we see today, that's our goal. And our goal is not to allow the plan to expire.
Yes, so unfortunately, I think this is going to happen more than just at this project, maybe not in the city of Lancaster, but we're certainly seeing it on our side of the table as a consultant in other development projects. So, scary times. Understand where you're at.
Thank you.
Any other discussion from the commission? Okay, do we have a motion on the floor?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the waiver request as noted, or modification.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor to approve the request.
Mr. Polite, just with the motion and the second and an opportunity for discussion, I'll just add one other thought for the commission. If you have needed to visit the urgent care at the hospital recently, you will have noticed that it is on the second floor of the emergency department, which is a temporary location for that facility. And unfortunately, it is not a desirable location. And I know if the hospital were here today, they would tell you that they're very eager to make space in that building to expand other emergency services that they currently don't have room for as they've been building out their emergency services department. So I know that this facility is much needed. Just in speaking with the hospital, this will allow them to free up space that they're currently using for urgent care and bring it to a ground level where the public can access it more easily in ambulances, et cetera. So just wanted to add that.
I just wanted to note real quick, I'm going to have to vote present because I work for LGH.
Okay, so that means we still have enough.
The vote, I think, still counts as a quorum. He
Okay.
just would be voting present, not aye or nay.
Okay.
Thank you for noting that.
So, ready for the question? All in favor?
Aye.
Present?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none. Ayes have it. Motion carry. Congratulations, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you very much.
we-
I'd just like to say, thank you for your consideration in this. I can tell you that we are excited about being in Lancaster City. And I hate that we are delaying a portion of our project, and I am very anxious to get it started. So I do appreciate your consideration, and hopefully sooner than later, you'll see us out there and building the residential as well. Okay,
Okay, yeah.
you.
Yeah, thank you.
thank you very much.
Okay, B, request for unit address deferment for the final land development plan at 221 and 227 North Prince Street. On behalf of the applicant, Light Hagel and Associates Incorporated, has requested to defer the unit address assignment to be processed with the Architectural Building Code review process rather than the land development plans. The various complement of the building, components of the building, units will be more specifically depicted on the architectural plan and can be seamless approval for assigning unit addresses.
Commission, I think you're familiar with this request because it's been brought to you a few times now. So certainly the city's in supportive of this, is supportive of the of the request, and think that it will allow for better coordination with emergency services going forward. This is an ordinance section that we hope to change when we do open the saldo for amendment next.
Just want to make my perennial request that we get this entered in as quickly as possible. We go over this every time.
Duly noted.
Can I make a motion to approve the request for unit address deferments for the final land development plans at 221 and 227 North Prince Street?
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Ready for the question? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, ayes have it, motion carried. Number 4, Redevelopment Authority of Lancaster, RACL, City Reinvest Board has forwarded 234 East Fulton Street for certification of blight. B, Planning Commission recommendations of approximate land use for the following properties: 506 Beaver Street and 415 Church Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is a property that where unfortunately the owner has passed away. This was serving as a residential property, although it looks like in the recent past that it had served as a commercial property before that, given the storefront. But most recently, it was a single-family home. The owner has since passed, and despite all of the proper notices going out, we haven't had any communication from the family, and the water was shut off for over 48 hours, which made the property condemnable. It was condemned in August 2022, and there haven't been any other communications or permits pulled. Ms. Sufer, is there anything you wanted to add, given your seat on the property commission?
No.
Okay.
Nothing specific. Thank you.
Okay. So the recommendation is to certify this property as blighted, and then it would come back to the commission for recommendation of use after that.
I'll make a motion to recommend the property for blight.
I'll second.
We have a motion on the floor for 221 and 227 for blight.
Yeah, sorry, this,
Okay, sorry about that.
yep, we have another discussion item after that on those two properties.
It's just, we're just on 234, right? Yeah. Ready for the question? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, ayes have it, motion carried. Comprehensive plan. Did we, oh, okay, I forgot about that. B, Planning Commission, appropriate land use for the following properties: 506 Beaver Street and 415 Church Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Both of these are pretty standard single-family row homes attached on both sides, 2 stories, and they have already been condemned, and they're being requested for a recommendation of use. Given that both of these are sort of standard single-family row homes with really no opportunity for commercial, given that they're in the middle of the block and don't have storefronts, the city is recommending that the use be residential going forward.
Make a motion to recommend both for residential.
Second.
We have
You
a
can
motion on the floor and a second for these properties: 506 Beaver Street and 415 Church Street to be residential. Ready for the question? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, ayes have it, motion carried. Comprehensive plan update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are continuing to make good progress on the comprehensive plan, and you should have all received an invitation from us this past week for May 24th at the Ware Center downtown. We will be sharing our draft policies and the draft future land use map, as well as some information about riverfront planning along the Conestoga as well. We have hired Tippett Weaver architects across the street to assist with some renderings of what these future land use categories could look like. And we're very excited to share that content with you. I think that's all I have to say for the moment. Happy to answer any questions if you have them. We're hard at work, and yeah, I think it's going to come together to be a really nice event.
Looking forward to it.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
There will be an open house portion where we'll have materials on display for review and discussion. There will be some light refreshments. And then there will be a formal presentation in the Steinman Auditorium where we'll walk through some of the key policies and decisions. And then continue the open house if there are any additional questions. There will be time, an opportunity to leave comments as well at the event too.
Great. Okay. Number 6, other business.
So we have had a number of discussions about short-term rentals, and planning staff would like to recommend that the proposed amendment to improve our short-term rental regulations be formally recommended by the Planning Commission. I'll go through those amendments in a moment, but just wanted to first talk through the process, just so you know, kind of, if you make a recommendation this evening, where that heads. So you all are the recommending body to City Council for legislation on zoning and subdivision land development. So if a recommendation is made this evening to recommend the amendment, then our next steps as planning staff would be sending this to county planning for their review. They review according to their comprehensive plan at the county. Then it would also go to City Council. At this point, it would be potentially on one of the May agendas, May or June, I'm not sure. And we would have to do legal advertisements as well. City Council would have a committee meeting where they review it, and then there would be 2 public meetings. One of them would be a public hearing where that would have to be legally advertised, and a court stenographer would be there to record the dialogue. And then the second reading usually is another opportunity for discussion and then consideration for adoption. So that's the standard process going forward. Just any questions about the zoning adoption process? Okay, I know some of you have been through this before, others it may be new, so just wanted to talk through that. So the proposed recommendations, thank you, Mandeli. So we left these fairly simple. We had a legal, an opportunity to meet with our legal counsel, was it 2 weeks ago, I think? Some members of the Planning Commission were able to make that. We met with Barry Handwerger and Neil Albert, and just allowed you all to ask questions about, how we can legislate short-term rentals in the state of Pennsylvania and in Lancaster City. So I hope that was informative to you all. And with that, we planning staff has kept the ordinance the same as the last time you've reviewed this. I do want to note that there was one interesting policy recommendation that was made and noted by Mr. Dastra in particular about how short-term rental legislation can help create some additional housing units. So in this particular ordinance, we're really talking about 1 or 2 apartment units above a commercial use. But also, Mr. Dastra noted that accessory dwelling units is another opportunity where we could see short-term rentals help fuel some additional housing units. I just want to note that this ordinance amendment still allows for those ADUs or those additional units to be created. We're just not at this time proposing to expand the district into the R3 and R4. We have kept the districts the same as where you set them last year. So just after some consideration, I realized that those accessory dwelling units are still a permitted right. They're single-family homes and would still be allowed to be constructed in the mixed-use district, central business, the two central business districts, C1, C2, C3, and RO. So I hope that comes to fruition as well. I think that is a promising angle. So with that, we'll just revisit quickly the ordinance amendments. So section 1 in this ordinance is to amend the definition of short-term rental to eliminate the single family and just allow dwelling unit. This is so that in the future we can potentially permit different kinds of housing types to be used for short-term rentals. Right now, this ordinance is only proposing single-family homes and apartment dwellings as defined in our zoning ordinance. So section 2, this is the footnote in a complicated ordinance reference here, section 300, attachment 213. This is basically amending our use table. Mandeli, could you scroll down just a little bit more? Thank you. So the footnote G is added to say that the dwelling unit must qualify as a single-family home or apartment as defined by the zoning ordinance. I know that this is still, we'd have to explain this to folks who want to do this, but an apartment is only 1 or 2 apartment units above a commercial use. It excludes all multifamily structures that would be 3 units or greater. So this is really just looking at small-scale mixed-use buildings in the districts where we currently permit. And then number 3 is adjusting the parking issue. The zoning hearing board will be very happy for this amendment to be made because they've probably heard close to 10 zoning hearing board appeals for this error that was made. So deleting the 1 per 2 bedrooms and further specifying to say 1 for 2 bedrooms dedicated as homestay and 0 if only 1 bedroom is dedicated as homestay. So we're referring to parking spaces here. I'm following the same language that's used throughout the rest of the table. So it sounds a little funny out of context, but it's 1 parking space for 2 bedrooms or 0 parking spaces if only 1 bedroom is dedicated to homestay. So those are the amendments. Happy to answer any questions or hear your discussion.
I do just have I know we talked about this before, the word apartment, and you're saying it's 1 or 2 units above commercial, not multifamily. But you're saying that is spelled out in the ordinance elsewhere, correct?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
In the definitions section of
That's
the,
gonna
the ordinance, it
Okay.
spells out what apartment, how it's defined. And
Okay.
it's probably redundant to say as defined by this zoning ordinance because it's inherent that if we use a term in the zoning ordinance, it's meant as we define it. But I think in this case, it's worth referencing as defined in the zoning ordinance in case any developer looks for that. Sorry.
Do you have the reference, like where that actually is?
Yes, and we could reference that section specifically. It would be the definition section of the ordinance. I don't have that particular section committed to memory.
I would also agree with that comment because I think it's important that we try to clarify as best we can so these the zoning is easily understood. So I like the idea of putting that reference in there.
Sure, we can do that. We can say, as defined in section 300-83 of the zoning ordinance. And when this is codified and incorporated into our E-code website, that would actually be linked so people can click on that and go to the definition section. Okay, I like that idea.
I would like to move that we recommend this, the updated ordinance to city council with the addition that we just talked about of putting the reference for the definition of apartment.
I'll second.
We have a motion on the floor and a second. Ready for the question? All in favor? Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none, ayes have it, motion carried. Yes, you're next.
Hey, guys, thanks for approving that. It's going to help me out a lot.
Want to quick give your name?
Oh, yeah,
We
Evan
know
Young.
you, but.
My name's Evan Young, 213 West King Street. I own a commercial property in the Central Business District, and I had been using short-term rental to help pay for the renovations and repair of my historic building that is mostly a commercial building. And the spirit of what I've been doing is I'm trying to build the place that I want to live, like the town that I want to live. And a lot of things that make a place that's really cool to live in can't really afford a high overhead. So short-term rental is a really powerful tool on my property to keep the overhead low for my other commercial tenants. Because the commercial tenants make this place an interesting place to live. So really my hope with this is that a lot of these properties, like out in the neighborhoods even, that have commercial uses, potential commercial uses that could add something really cool to the neighborhood. But maybe they're not because it's hard to cover the overhead for that use. This may reduce the overhead. Like you might be able to, somebody intrepid could come in and buy up an old, what's that? Jethro's, the old Jethro's, is that still vacant?
Yes, it's still vacant.
Yeah, like, I don't know how to make that commercially viable now, because a liquor license is impossible to buy. Like, I don't know how to do that, how to make something interesting for the neighborhood, and cover the overhead at the same time. So my hope is for this, that this is a great incentive to buy some of these commercial properties that can be mixed use, use the upper floor as a short-term rental, cover all the overhead, and then just do something really cool downstairs and not worry about it. I think that's possibly a problem solver. So I just wanted to make that public statement as such, so that maybe somebody else might be inspired. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So no other public comment? Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I would like to move to adjourn the meeting. Sorry.
I'll second that motion.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn the meeting. All in favor? Aye. Be known by aye. 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 Opposed? Ayes have it. Meeting adjourned. At
Thank you, everyone.
6:27.